Hello. Today we like to speak about vaping, electric cigarettes. Vaping, kashrut, does it require kashrut, or one can have any flavor that he wants without any problem? Well, before we start with the kashrut, one needs to know that there is an aspect of danger as well to smoking or vaping those e-cigarettes. What does that mean? It's true that electric cigarettes are much less dangerous than the regular tobacco cigarettes, but there's a big difference between the two that makes, in a way, electric cigarette worse. One thing is that the regular tobacco cigarettes has been extremely unpopular in the last few years as people understand the danger, and people also are disgusted from the smell, from the taste, from the way it also perceived in the public, and therefore there would be less and less smokers around the world. But as the electric cigarettes came up, vaping became extremely popular, and extremely large amount of people joined the smoking community, the vaping community, and especially a lot of the teenagers, so much so that it became a plague that people are smoking right and left all the time. And we're talking about teenagers as well. People that didn't even think about smoking at all became smokers, although it's not the regular smoke, it's vaping, but there is a danger aspect in that as well, as it's made also with chemicals that, and there is a small amount of tobacco, which is something that's addictive, and therefore they found that vaping is even more addictive than regular cigarettes, and therefore you see that so many people get hooked up to vaping. Another interesting idea is that smoking has a certain length. So after a few puffs, you finish that cigarette, and then it takes you a while until you get to the next cigarette. But vaping is something that people do around the clock the whole day. The whole day they're with the electric cigarettes, it doesn't end, and they keep on smoking it without an end. And that is something that increases the danger very much. And it could be that in that aspect, with all that we spoke, the regular cigarettes already were better because there's so much less smokers than what we have today, and so much more smoking is involved than those regular cigarettes, the tobacco cigarettes. So that is something that one needs to keep in mind, and that falls definitely under the issue of v'nishmartem me'od lenafshotechem. One needs to keep his body healthy, and remember that the body is not his body. Our soul doesn't belong to us. Kadosh Baruch Hu gave it to us as a collateral for the time being that we're here in this world, and eventually we have to give it back, and we're not allowed to put it in danger in any possible way. And that is the issue of Nishmatem Od Nafshatechem. When it comes to the aspect of Kashrut, one needs to know that the vaping has some things that raise serious questions. For example, when one vapes, the taste of the thing is getting into his mouth and he swallows it. Now, what is it exactly? That juice, the e-juice, is made with glycerin and other chemicals as well, but the glycerin is something that is derived from animals. Now, when it's derived from animals, it's not derived from only kosher animals, it's also derived from non-kosher animals. Even if the kosher animals were not shecht, they were not slaughtered al-pi halacha, and therefore it's considered nevelot. So regardless if we're talking about glycerin is something that is forbidden, midoraita, it's a biblical prohibition. Therefore, when one smokes it, he puts into his body something that's not permitted. Secondly, when you smoke, the steam goes into your body. It's not the same as the cigarette, which is smoke. You burn the ashes, or the tobacco ashes, and it goes into your body. Over there, the poskim were lenient. Cham Ovadia writes in Chazon Ovadia on Pesach that even if the cigarette had something that's not allowed in it, but since it burns before you smoke it, such a thing would be permitted. But we're talking about vaping, nothing's burned. You just inhale the steam that comes out of that juice, and therefore that's something that's asur. Inhaling steam is considered in halacha ze'at mashkim kemashkim. According to all opinions, the steam that you inhale, if it's considered the same as the prohibition itself, as the food itself, and therefore, just like you're not allowed to drink that e-juice, same thing would be inhaling it. Thirdly, there's also a problem that the droplets are entering your mouth. When you vape, it's not only that steam goes into your mouth, but you can feel that there's droplets that come into your mouth. They examined it. They put a tissue on top of the filter of the e-cigarette, and they saw while they're vaping, they became extremely wet from the steam. Therefore, that thing enters your mouth. You don't spit it out. It stays in your mouth. Such a thing, for sure, requires kashrut. Now, there is a sugya on this in the Gemara Avodah Zarah, something that is called bat tiha. It was a certain barrel that they put wine in it. That the wine was yain nesech. It's wine that's forbidden, goyim wine. And there would be people examining the wine. So they would go to the hole of the barrel and inhale that wine. There was a machloket over there in the Gemara, Abai v'Rava. Abai said it's not allowed. Rava said it's permitted to test or to examine the wine in such a fashion. And la'alacha, in Yored Siman Kufchet in Hilchot Ta'aruvot, Sif Hey, the Shulchan Aruch says that will be permitted. One thing to note is that the Rama writes over there that it's not permitted to drink from the wine. Over here, we already said that when you enter something into your mouth that's already the liquid itself, as we explained before, the droplets himself, that's already considered tasting. But without that, even if that wouldn't happen, let's see if that's comparable to the bat tiha, to this barrel that we're talking about. So one thing that you can right away see from the Gemara, Tosfot explains that the reason that practice was permitted in order to examine the wine is because the doing so would damage the person. It would be very unpleasant flavor to do it in such a way. It would be something that's uncomfortable, unpleasant. Therefore, it would be permitted. In halakha, we have a differentiation between something that's pleasant and unpleasant. When something is unpleasant, it's considered noten ta'am lefgam, it's davar pagum. So for such things, not always things are forbidden. But when something is pleasant, definitely it has to be kosher 100%. So over here, when one vapes, definitely it's very pleasant. That's why he does it. That's why it comes in different flavors. And therefore, such a thing would not be permitted in any way. So it's not comparable at all to that of the Shulchan Aruch, and especially that we mentioned the Rama that says that actually tasting from the thing would be for sure not permitted. Over here, it's more comparing to the tasting, even more so. Let's see. We said already that it's asur because of the vaping. We said it's asur because of the droplets that falls into your mouth, and we said also it's asur because of the steam, ze'at mashkim kemashkim. But there are poskim that argued over the matter of smoking a cigarette that they moist a little bit with some things that are not permitted, like yain nesech, or you put over there other things. And if you take a look in the Shaarei Tshuva and Kufchet, he brings over there the Shaarei Melech. Shaarei Melech felt that one could be lenient smoking such a cigarette. It's a big machloket, as I explained. There are those that are mekel. Shaarei Melech was the first one that spoke about it. It was mekel, he was lenient. And let's see if we can compare the e-cigarette to what he was lenient, and we'll see from the following that it's not comparable at all, and one can't be permitted even according to those that are lenient. The one thing that the Shaarei Melech said is that yain nesech could be lenient because it's the Rabbanan, and therefore maybe Chachamim only prohibited yain nesech if you actually drink it, but not if you do it in a strange way, like inhaling it. And therefore, when we're talking about e-cigarettes, we're not talking about Isur de Rabbanan, we're talking about Isur de Oraita. Therefore, it's a biblical prohibition, the glycerin, and other things that might be in there as well that are not permitted, and therefore definitely can be compared to that, and the Shaarei Melech would say that it is forbidden. Secondly, he writes over there that maybe it's batel b'shishim, it's null and void by 60, because it's very low amount, a very small amount of yain nesach that they put in there, and therefore it could be very much that it's batel. Over here, it's definitely the glycerin is not batel for two reasons. First of all, they put a large amount of glycerin in it. Secondly, and we have to understand the reason they put in it because the glycerin has a good flavor. That's the reason they put it in there. And not only in that, in many things they put glycerin because it's sweet and tastes good. Like for instance, they put in tooth paste glycerin in order to make it feel for the person putting it in his mouth in order to feel good. So therefore, that's the reason they put it. They put it for the flavoring. Secondly, anything that is put for the flavoring, la'alacha, we posek in beginning of Ta'arovot, Tzadik Chet, Seif Chet, the Rama brings down that midi David letam, anything that comes to a flavor is not permitted, is not batel, it's not null and void. Even if you have 60 or more, it's not batel because that's what it's put for. It's put for the flavor. Therefore, over here, it would not be permitted. Moreover, he says the Shaarei Melech that when you put such a thing, it's put the wine is put in the cigarette only for the smell, for the scent. Over here, it's not put for the scent; it's put for the flavor, and therefore such a thing would not be permitted. So when we're dealing with all these things, one needs to understand that for all these reasons and more, inhaling the e-cigarette must have Hechsher. It has to have a valid and good Hechsher on it. Otherwise, it's mamash like taking any other trefot and eating or drinking it. And besides the issur that we started with, of v'nishmartem od lenafshotechem, one needs to know whether we're dealing with Pesach or all year round. The e-cigarettes, vaping, must have kashrut.